Hey, Chargers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. Alex is not able to join us tonight, so it's just me and Tyler again. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm full. Just had some lobster tacos, so I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Lobster tacos, man. From where?
It's called Guacamigos in Newport Beach. The food's overall okay, but those lobster tacos are pretty good.
Awesome, man. I'm doing great as well. Had some Doghouse Grill or Firestone. I know there's some people that live in San Luis Obispo that listen to us. So great pulled pork sandwich. Fantastic. I love that place.
Nice.
So we're going to have some fun today. We're going to discuss some of the mock drafts that you guys sent us on Twitter. We got like 30, 40 entries, so we're obviously not going to be able to cover all of them. And obviously some of them do get a little redundant, just because of the sheer volume. And then we're also going to talk about some of the visits that the Chargers have done with draft prospects, and we'll get started with that one. Tyler, does any of the names that the Chargers have met with jump out to you as somebody that you think would be a really good fit for the Chargers?
I think it fits all over every box that needs to be checked. Is Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame, the tight end out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
A kind of a low production guy at Notre Dame. I think only like 20 catches, but a ferocious run blocker and a guy that, they're projected to get in like the fourth or so round. This is a great Virgil Green replacement. Should they go that route? I love Virgil Green. We love Virgil Green. He did so well last year before he got hurt. But at some point with his age, you want to move on. If you can get a guy in the fourth round just to be that good run blocking, sometimes an option tight end, I think it's a perfect fit. And he's from Notre Dame. So I think everything lines up. He's from Notre Dame. It's a blocking tight end is kind of a position of need for them. Virgil Green is leaving. I think it's a really good fit all around.
I do as well. And it's very similar to, the conversation that was going about around Joshua Kelly last year. It's like, he didn't catch the ball a lot, but he can do it. And so Tommy Tremble, I think like he can be a versatile tight end and be able to catch the ball and give you some yards after the catch. He was just such an insane blocker that's all Notre Dame had him do. And you watch Notre Dame film and he's taking on edge rushers one-on-one. He's leading as a lead blocker and just blowing dudes up. He is by far the best blocking tight end or best blocker of the tight end group, if you want to say it that way, in this class. And you mentioned the Notre Dame thing. I think if you pick any Notre Dame player, I think Tommy Tremble would be near the top of my list. I think Aaron Banks, the offensive lineman, would probably be my favorite Notre Dame selection, but Tommy Tremble certainly has an argument to be made for number one on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a perfect fit for the Chargers, and should they look that way, wouldn't surprise me at all. After watching him, there are fewer more perfect fits in this draft, I think, than Tommy Tremble. Not that he's the greatest player that they could get, but that fit and need is so perfect for them. So definitely keep my eye on him for sure.
Absolutely. And for me, like the name that really jumped out was Asante Samuel Jr., the cornerback from Florida State. And, he is a little undersized, and some people have said that, maybe he might be best suited to play in the slot at the next level. But, you watch his tape as an outside corner, and it's fantastic. And him and Deontay Brown, who I love, had a fantastic battle between the two of them this season. And you watch him compete, you watch him produce, and to me, he's an outside corner, and he has good length. He's got good ball skills, and he can make up for, being 5'9" or 5'10" or whatever he is. His dad did post a picture of the two of them next to each other, and the son is taller than the dad, for whatever that's worth. But he's somebody that I think would be a really great fit for what Brandon Staley wants to do. You can look at how he compares and how he measures up to a Darius Williams, somebody that can play outside, inside, play a little safety on occasion, cover the deep third, cover the deep, cover a deep half, if you will. And I think Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round is something that would make a lot of sense for me.
Yeah, second round. Okay, who am I as someone who's almost the same height? Who am I to tell him that he's too short to play football? I think he's a fantastic corner, and like you've mentioned a couple of times, they don't have to panic and take one of the big three corners at 13. There are some guys. I mean, I was just watching one game of Keith Taylor. I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good. There are some guys in the second and third round that I think you can, pull some pretty decent names and make them legit starters. And his biggest value right now is the fact that he's one of the few guys who's actually going to tackle the running back
Yep.
or tight end or whoever it is. I don't think there's many guys outside of Horn, Samuel. I think Taylor was a willing player, but otherwise, I think that value is going to keep him very high up there. And if we can give smaller receivers, I don't know, credit or due, because they're small but they play tough. Like, why can't we do the same thing for corners? Now I
Right.
understand, and if you're going up against a guy who's 6'3", like a receiver can get away with being shorter, I think, more than a corner, but still, if you do your job well, and it's clearly not a disadvantage yet, look, these guys are in the second or third round for a reason. If he was taller, he'd be in the first round, no problem. Right. But he's shorter. So you're going to get him in the second round. And I think that's a great spot to take him. And, the Chargers need it, whether they take him and he is their starter this year, or maybe he's just the starter next year. Like Nwosu wasn't the immediate starter. Adderley wasn't the immediate starter. Henry wasn't the immediate starter, but they take him and they build him along, and then he just plugs in next year. For, I guess, if Hayward goes or whatever happens at the corner position. I think it's a really good fit for them. By all means, seems like a high character, good guy, blood in the family. So I think it's another really good meeting for them that I'm excited about.
Yeah, it is. This is one of the most unfortunate situations of which Tom Telesco has created. Is like, the cornerback position in general, something that teams need to be proactive about.
Mm-hmm.
And he should have had the foresight last year to take a cornerback. And looking at Michael Davis potentially leaving, and Casey Hayward getting older, and Chris Harris getting older, and so they might not be able to afford taking a cornerback in the early rounds. Obviously, with the offensive line needs and a pass rusher need. And so it might not be able to happen this year either. They might just have to rely upon those two returning to form, and maybe Casey Hayward bouncing back. But taking a cornerback in the second round, to me, makes so much more sense. And, we talked about this a little bit. If you're going to take a non-offensive lineman in the first round, to me, it's an edge rusher, because the edge rusher class is deep, but it's not like there aren't many other players that I can look at in the second or third rounds and be like, okay, I can see this guy developing into a star pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the second round in terms of the cornerbacks, you have Samuel, you have Keith Taylor, you have Greg Newsome, you have you have 4 or 5 guys that you could potentially get in the second round that I could see realistically becoming a star cornerback. And I think that really is like the difference for me. It's so much easier to find a cornerback in a later rounds than it is a pass rusher. And that's every single year. Obviously, Greg Rousseau, Kwity Paye, Azeez Ojulari, they're not Chase Young. They're not a Bosa brother, but they're still really high-end prospects, in my opinion. And so just the depth of the cornerback class and, the perceived lack thereof has been one of the most overstated narratives, in my opinion, of this draft cycle, because there are a lot of good cornerbacks in the second and third rounds that I would be thrilled if the Chargers were able to get their hands on one.
I agree. And the more I watch film on all these guys, whether it's a couple of games, one game with Taylor so far, you start to notice that there is actually more depth in this draft than I realized. Yeah. It's the reason you don't have to panic with receiver at 13. It's why you don't have to panic with corner at 13. And, I'm a fan of taking these guys. Look, the most mocked guy so far seems to be Quincy Roche in the third to the Chargers by every Chargers fan. And I get that, but there is a significant drop off in Quincy Roche is great in the third round. That's good value, I think. But there's a significant drop off between Ojulari and Quincy Roche or Phillips or Paye or some of these guys, or even Rousseau. Like, I think just the pure talent of the 2 guys that were on Miami, the other 2 guys that aren't Roche, are just, there's just a really big drop off. And I think you have to capitalize on edge sooner and build through the trenches, because what does Gavino always put? No pressure, no diamonds. So Gavino's always saying that. Got to get pressure. And, I'm trench pick either way at this point. I've kind of shifted towards, I prefer offensive line, but I'll take a trench pick, and that kind of still satisfies, just building a team that way in the first round.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I still think offensive line should be the pick, but, again, you look at the second round and the kind of offensive lineman that they could grab there. Landon Dickerson potentially, Creed Humphrey, Dylan Radunes potentially, James Hudson, Walker Little. Like, there are some good potential starting offensive linemen that they could grab in the second round. Again, I think you should take one in the first round, but they have options, and I think I agree with you. It has to be a trench pick. So outside of the other meetings that they were able to take, I'm not taking away anything like major, last year the Chargers didn't meet with Kenneth Murray at all after the combine, and they still drafted him. So
Yeah.
none of these meetings signify that they're going to draft someone, but you can kind of take away patterns, right? And so, you can look at them meeting with Asante Samuel and Trill Williams, the cornerback, and maybe see that they are interested in a day 2 corner. You can look at them meeting with Jarrett Patterson, the running back from Buffalo, and Shane Simpson, the running back from Virginia, and take away that they are interested in potentially adding a day 3 running back to the group. And so those really are the things that you take away from these meetings. Obviously, they could take, Darius Stills, a defensive lineman from West Virginia, but meeting with them doesn't mean that they are going to draft a certain player.
Not at all. I think even Joey Bosa said, like, I heard from the Chargers once, and I had no idea that they were going to take me, and then they took him 3rd overall. So, whatever happens is whatever happens. But it does look like, just sifting through everything, that I really think, because they met with Dylan Radunes, and sure, he's been mocked in the 2nd round in some of these mocks, but he could legitimately go in the 1st round. So it really seems like they are looking at skill position players on day 2, on day 3, some of those corner receivers, like I don't know if Rondale Moore is going to be there in the 2nd, but if he falls to the 2nd, I think they'd consider it. It looks like they're just looking for these corners, these receivers, these skill position guys that they can get anytime after day 1, because that day 1 pick is going to be in the trenches. It's a tackle, it's a guard, it's an edge rusher, whatever. And everything else, all these meetings are to figure out which, how do we want to fit the rest of these skill position guys on our roster? So that's the only other really pattern I took away, which you kind of already mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. So it's fun to look at. I think in that meeting with Anthony Schwartz, it was cool to see. Like, it makes a lot of sense on paper. Same with Rondale Moore, who I've kind of come around upon. I was not a huge fan of him, especially with the injuries. But going back and watching, I was watching his freshman tape against Ohio State and Michigan State today, and dude, like, he just does things with the ball that you don't see out of many other guys. Like, it's him and Kadarius Toney and maybe a little bit of Amari Rogers, who can create yards after contact as a receiver in the fashion that they do. So fun players for sure, who would add a lot of versatility to the Chargers offense.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I'm glad you're not seeing the light. You said seeing the light. I don't know if you're seeing the light just yet. I know you only have them in your top 15 or so. But that's good. I actually was planning on coming in onto the show and saying, hey, Steven and I disagree on this receiver, and we're not butthurt about it. We're okay with it. Like, we just disagree. That's fine. But then you watched some tape and you liked him a little more. What he was doing as a freshman is ridiculous. Freshman or whatever his first year in college is ridiculous. Walking into Northwestern and going, hi, my name is Rondale Moore. I'm going to put up 200 yards and 13 touches against you guys. Like, crazy. This guy just roasting at everybody. Impressive guy for sure. If he's there in the 2nd, I'll certainly consider it. But I'm glad you like him a little more.
Like, disagreeing is fine. Jason and I had a bunch of disagreements on players last year, and that's just.
And you were right about all of them.
Well, we'll have to see how that pans out. He was right on some players that I wasn't.
Which one?
But I would have to go back and look. Sorry, Jason, if you're listening to that, man.
I'm kidding, Jason.
But I think disagreeing is fine, and people see things differently.
Sure.
I was talking with John Ayers today about Deontay Brown, who I have absolutely zero interest in any round. I just don't see it. But a lot of Chargers fans think Deontay Brown would be a good fit, and I could not disagree more. And that's okay. It's just my opinion. But it is what it is.
He's a hell of a guy. He's a big old guy, but boy, does he not do anything like the Chargers are used to seeing out of their guards, which is movement. For as much as we dislike, not dislike, but have not want Feeney anymore, he can move. Like, these guys can move, they can pull, they can something. Deontay Brown is great, but he is in a phone booth, and that phone booth is packed.
Yeah, if you're asking him to do anything where that involves him getting to the 2nd level, it's just not going to work. And I think, the Chargers system is obviously up in the air, but I think it's going to be, a heavy reliance on outside zone, on screens, on other things like that, where the guards are going to have to get to the 2nd level and make blocks, and same with the tackles and same with the center. And that is just not what Deontay Brown does at all. So we're going to get into these mock drafts that some of you guys sent us. Again, We're going to talk about 6 or 7, depending on how the time goes. But thank you so much for submitting them. I had a lot of fun reading them. If we don't get to yours, I'm sorry. I hope that I responded. And if I haven't yet, I will definitely do that. So the first one I want to talk about here is from Nate Stein. He had the Chargers taking Rashawn Slater at 13. He also mentioned that Elijah Vera Tucker fell at 23 and potentially trading back up into the first round to get him. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about here is he had Wyatt Davis at 47, Tyson Campbell, the cornerback from Georgia, at 77, and then Tyler Shelvin, the defensive tackle from LSU. He was mocked to the Chargers in this, like so many other people had him here. So I love that. And then Trey Brown, the cornerback from Oklahoma, at 118, and then Jonathan Cooper, the defensive end from Ohio State, at 160. So the reason why I thought this was really interesting is that he double dipped at cornerback. He took Tyson Campbell and Trey Brown. And again, we talked about this earlier. Tom Telesco had not been proactive. That's being very proactive, right? Whether you're potentially cutting Casey Hayward, you get 2 super athletic cornerbacks that I think would be really good fits in what the Chargers want to do on defense.
That's a good call to take 2 corners. I don't like Tyson Campbell, man. Maybe in the 3rd round. Holy Lord. I don't know. I don't understand. Look, nothing against him. He did fine. I'm obviously more of a Stokes person, but man, you got burned for 340 yards, 5 touchdowns, the passer rating 114 in college. You got destroyed by Alabama. And look, it's one thing to get roasted by Jalen Waddle. Everybody does. He was just late getting over to Waddle. He should have stayed with him, and he got beat over the top. That's fine. But then he got, this guy's supposed to be like 100, 200 meter, track, speedy burst kind of guy. He couldn't cover a hitch to save his life. Couldn't cover an out to save his life. And he's getting beat over the top twice against Florida. Then he gets beat over the top against Tennessee. Has no ball skills. I really don't see it with Tyson Campbell. 3rd round is okay though. I don't hate that one too much. But I don't know. I haven't watched Trey Brown. Jonathan Cooper, I watched 1 game of his so far, and Alex Leatherwood completely erased him. So yeah. But again, you're getting a guy in the 6th round from Ohio State. I'm sure he has some upside somewhere. I just happened to watch probably his worst game. Tyler Shelvin is the guy I'll pound the table for. Because his name is Tyler, and because look, I mean, hell yeah. He's a guy who's like Deontay Brown, just big, has supposedly too much weight. He moves so well for a guy as big as he is. I am shocked at how well this guy moves. And you can consider weight a problem maybe, but it hasn't hindered him so far. He looked so good. I wish we had seen more. I wish we had seen him at all in 2020. Yeah. It's unfortunate he opted out. I mean, it's a good job opting out. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see him where he could be. I don't know. Just a lot of these interior defensive linemen, they don't have what he has. They don't have that ability just to stop the run, to take 2, 3 guys on and say, nope, I'm not moving. Thank you. I know some of these guys can be more 3-4 defensive ends, but I always say like Barmore and Nixon, these guys are probably maybe a 3 or 4 defensive end. They don't hold up against the run. They don't have what Shelvin does. Yeah. And I just think, he's being mocked here as the Chargers' 4th pick or the end of the 3rd round. I think he might go higher just because I think, look, I don't care if his pass rush win rate is 4.8%. I don't buy that, honestly. Apparently it's not very good. I don't know. I just don't buy that when I watch it. It's so much better. There's so much effort. He moves so well. I really think he's going to go earlier than their 4th pick in the draft.
I agree with you. He could. Like, this defensive tackle class is not very good. And so, taking somebody that is so safe like Tyler Shelvin earlier would make a lot of sense for teams. And one of the first games that I watched of his was the SEC championship game against Georgia. And if you know anything about Georgia and their offensive line, they love huge individuals. Like, they have Ben Cleveland, for example, who he weighs 340 pounds, but it's a different 340 pounds. And then I forget who their other guard was, but he plays for the Dolphins now. He's like a 3rd round pick. And so the interior trio for Georgia weighed over 1,000 pounds combined. And Tyler Shelvin was not moving. Like, the 3 of them could not move Tyler Shelvin off the ball. And so, you take all the problems that the Chargers have had stopping the run and being able to take Tyler Shelvin and say, okay, you are going to set the line of scrimmage for us. And that's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is his mantra. And sure, like his pass rush win rate might suck and he might not offer a ton in that regard, but there's still a lot of value in players like that. And if you get him in the second pick of your third round, like that's an awesome pick to me. And some people might not think, oh, like, you know, they could have grabbed a receiver or something like that. But, you know, the Chargers run defense improves drastically if they get Tyler Shelvin, in my opinion.
If they got him and had some rotation, Joseph, I mean, I just think
it'd be nasty.
I just think he's a guy you have to get. Like, I just think this fits so well. It's a proactive move by the Chargers, who may not have Joseph next year, who knows what they're thinking of the rest of their defensive tackle class, which there are a bunch of pass rushers. They don't have, I mean, I guess Joseph, but they haven't drafted a guy like this since they tried to, like, Ryan Carruthers back in 2015, who was that wrestler squatty guy.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they haven't really gotten a guy like this. And I just would love for them to take this guy because, you know, if some of these guys, some of the projection you're trying to do with these players is how did they get better from the last time we saw them over the past year, even though they opted out. I'd really think the teams are going to find out that he probably has, because I just think he has so much heart and works so hard. This guy is trying spin moves. He's a 356-pound nose tackle who I've seen try spin moves multiple times, late, very late, and not as really as a pass rush move, but just to get back in the lane as the quarterback is taking off or whatever. Like, I have a feeling this guy's going to be a lot better, and we just don't really know it yet because we haven't seen him.
Yeah, you know, the first week of the season, DJ Reader gave the Chargers a ton of problems. And so,
yeah,
you know, if the Chargers could get their version of DJ Reader, I think that would be a fantastic selection. And I think Tyler Shelvin could certainly do that. And then obviously, you know, 13 and 47, taking two offensive linemen. It's a man to my own heart. I love those two selections. Taking Slater and Wyatt Davis is a no-brainer, in my opinion. I'd be curious to see how this board had panned out at 47.
Yeah.
You know, Wyatt Davis, you know, he's a back-to-back All-American. He's got a ton of name recognition. I think, you know, when I went back and watched this film, I was a little disappointed in how he played, but, you know, that could be a lot of different things. You know, COVID really did a number on Ohio State this season. So I don't know how much stock to put into his 2020 tape, but, you know, when they played, when they played Alabama, it was not pretty against Christian Barmore. And, you know, Christian Barmore is somebody that a lot of teams have. And so I understand why people have soured on him. You know, Pro Football Network, the other mock draft company, like they still have him as a top 20 player. And I get that. I think I'm a little lower on Wyatt Davis than I was previously.
Yeah, I kept hearing about this guy and I was thinking I was going to turn on the tape and find some really dominant guy. And there are definitely flashes of it. But the first time I ever watched him live was against Alabama. It was not pretty. And then he got hurt. So it just, I mean, credit to Barmore and some of those guys, but yeah, it just wasn't super pretty. A guy we were talking about taking maybe at 13 overall. And now it's just like, I don't think I would take him till the second round, but I would just be curious. Wyatt Davis played right guard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just curious if did Nate say if Slater was their tackle or their left guard?
They
did in free agency?
No.
Okay, I'm going to assume Slater's their tackle, but either way, two guys on the offensive line, fine by me. Works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nate, thank you for that one. Let's move on to the next one, which comes from Riley Williams. He says that Trey Turner was a cap casualty. He signed Corey Linsley, Leonard Floyd, and Mackenzie Alexander, which I think would be a really interesting pick. And also re-signed Henry and Davis. And he also said Lamp, Perryman, Toner, Vigil, and Jenkins. So
they signed all of those guys?
I guess so. So his pick again, Rashawn Slater at 13, again, which was a very common selection.
Sure.
Landon Dickerson at 47, which we would love that selection. Tylan Wallace at 77, Paulson Adebo at 97, and then the safety from USC, Talona Huvanga. I honestly don't know how to say that one. And then Patrick Johnson, the edge rusher from Tulane, with the 160th pick.
Well, thanks, Riley. I have not seen your 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th selections, so I couldn't really tell you much about these guys. And anything you know about Slater, everybody's already said. Yeah. And Dickerson, who I was lower on before, but as soon as you get that all 22, grade bumped up. You had a great breakdown, grade bumped up. Um, Ben Cleveland is another guy who's, kind of the same bigger size, 6'6", whatever guard. But Leonard Dickinson doesn't have those balance issues. Leonard Dickinson is like a much better Ben Cleveland, in my opinion. And so the first 2 picks, love them. The next 4, I am sorry, Riley. You did a great job with your scouting. I have no idea. Well, I know who they are. I've not watched them yet.
Yeah, so Tylan Wallace is somebody that really would interest me because, I think he's one of the more underrated receivers in this class. Very similar build and skill set to Des Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
Just Oklahoma State really only used him as a jump ball guy, which I really kind of just was not super high on because he can do that, but I think he's only 6'1", 6'2". He's not somebody that should be just a jump ball guy.
Sure.
And then he went down to the Senior Bowl and he was able to show a versatile skill set and had a wonderful week down there. So that's a pick in the 3rd round that I think would make a lot of sense. Again, being proactive, potentially losing Mike Williams next year. Maybe not getting development from KJ Hill, Joe Reed. So I think that would make a lot of sense. I have not watched 2020 version of Paulson Adebo. I want to say he was like a high 5-star recruit to Stanford. Like he was one of their highest recruited players in program history, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But his 2019 tape was not pretty. So 2020, I hope that he would have bounced back, but he's got really good size. I want to say he's like 6'2", got good length, good physicality. Just not super interested in him, but I wasn't sure if you had watched him either. And then, Talona Hufanga, the safety from USC, he's a missile, man. He hits people hard. He's a really athletic player. So again, that would make a lot of sense in terms of being proactive, giving Alohi Gilman some competition maybe. Right. And that would also allow Alohi to focus on special teams, which I thought was an interesting idea.
How would you compare Gilman and Hufanga in coverage?
I would say Hufanga is more athletic. So I think, his traits would translate better in terms of learning coverage, but USC really used him as a box safety more than anything else.
Okay.
So he in an interview compared himself to Jamal Adams. I don't see that, but
why not?
Yeah, if you're gonna compare yourself to any safety and you're a box safety, why not choose Jamal Adams, I guess. But I just thought it was interesting, potentially choosing a safety in the mid rounds. It's not really something that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think you can't really rely on Gilman to play those snaps. You cannot at this point rely on Derwin James to be healthy. Obviously, Hufanga you're not taking to start, but you need some guys behind these guys. So you're not retreading and taking Jaleel Adai and Jalen Watkins, which you kind of maybe should have done earlier in the season. Oh no, Jalen Watkins was cut. You should have retained those guys, or you should have retained Watkins to have some of that depth behind you. And instead they had to wait and then prayed Adai would figure it out. And then Watkins was cut and they finally got him. So having some more safeties behind this guy, so just more toys for Staley to play with. And I think they have a really good set of like DB coach, secondary coach, defensive coordinator, and Staley. So I think this is a really good like culture and environment for these guys to grow in. So, if he's a heat-seeking missile, great. Like you need that on special teams. You need something because they couldn't tackle for shit last season. So
no.
If you can be a heat-seeking missile and make some tackles, fine by me. Like if that's your role so far, that's great because that's more than they had last year.
Yeah, this is kind of different, but the Chargers do have some restricted free agents this year that they've got to take care of. And BJ Bello is one of them. And I think, not enough people are talking about what he did on special teams last year. I think once he was activated to the full roster, activated to the active roster, I thought he was the best special teamer on the team. So BJ Bello, I think, is somebody that should be re-signed. Just a little tidbit there. So move on to the next one from Derek Radcliffe. This one is interesting. Like, this is not something that a lot of people are talking about. And I really love the player individually that he has in the second round, but it's interesting. Like this really like got the wheels turning. So he had Samuel Cosmi at 13, which I love. And then he had Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina at 47, Sean Wade, the corner from Ohio State at 77, Tyler Shelvin, Demetric Felton at 118, and then again, Jonathan Cooper at 160. So Tyler, a running back in the second round, man. What do you think about that one?
I have secretly taken Javonte Williams in the second round a couple of times in some TDN mocks. The idea of having Eckler and Williams in the backfield, who are so good at breaking tackles, though. Like Eckler is so hard to tackle, whether it's elusiveness or just power. Having a guy like Williams, if it not for Najee Harris, Williams, some guys just play football like they're really good at playing football at their position. He just looks and acts like a running back. I don't understand how to like convey what that means, but sometimes you watch guys and it's like, that's just a running back. Javonte Williams in the second round. I'm not a huge fan of the luxury picks like that in the second round, but like anything, you take care of something in free agency, you can maybe make that pick. And look, the Chargers have nothing behind Eckler that I would rely on at all. So I think the need for running back is legit. And if they took Williams in the second round, and if he's there, it really wouldn't surprise me because he honestly might, if I don't know, looking at my imaginary board in front of me, he might actually be the best player available at that point.
Right.
You know, a guy that I think you and I have a first round grade on, being there in the mid of the second round, like that's really hard to pass up because there is kind of a need there. And Eckler has not played a full season as a starter yet. You're going to need some other guy. Can't rely on Jackson. Can't rely on Kelly. I don't know where Pope is or Balaj is not returning or whatever. I think it's a legit need. Is it early? Yes. Would I do it? Probably not, but boy, would I be tempted. And man, would this be fun, especially because he took Cosme at 13, who I'm not as big a fan of as you are. But you start to build this offensive line, maybe took two other offensive linemen in free agency.
Yeah.
And now you have Cosme at tackle. Then you have Eckler and Williams. Whew, like I would pay. Well, I'm already paying a lot of money to see it. So I will be there to see it already.
Oh man, Javonte Williams on this offense with Austin Eckler, like that is the perfect pairing because you know I think everybody knows the problems that the Chargers rushing attack had once Eckler went down, just because they didn't.
Yeah.
You know, Eckler is elusive and strong. He can break tackles, and the Chargers didn't have that without him. And you know, Justin Jackson again has the health issues, and Joshua Kelly, you know, has confidence issues, and I don't really know what to make of him going forward. So it's a massive, massive luxury pick. But at the same time, like if you're looking at this board, you know, hypothetically, you know, and you're the Chargers and, you know, Dylan Raduins is gone and Landon Dickerson is gone and Joe Tryon is gone. Like any kind of cornerback, edge rusher, offensive tackle that you think like, okay, this is a plug and play starter. If you want to just take the best player available and it's Javonte Williams, and that definitely could be a possibility, then I could see them making that happen because it is a need. Yeah. And you want to be able to use Austin Eckler in as much of a versatile role as possible. And so having a true, like, complementary physical running back next to him, it makes a lot of sense. Again, in the second round, it's a massive luxury pick, but I love Javonte Williams, man. And him and Najee Harris are so close for me. And I don't think, like, everybody loves Travis Etienne, and I get that. But Javonte Williams is just a wrecking ball of a running back, and he can do everything too. Like he can catch the ball, he can run outside, he can run inside, he breaks tackles, he's elusive. I love Javonte Williams. This was a really interesting pick.
I love the pick. You'd have to show me what you did in free agency. You'd have to show me what you did with your first round pick. But otherwise, I really like it. I think it was against Miami. I wrote down, this is the best run play I've seen of any back this entire season. There's a play where he must have broken 5 or 6 tackles.
It's insane.
Left sideline. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like you're playing against who? Miami? Like, I mean, they were so good. And I mean, just watching Williams and Carter. I've seen Carter. I don't know what it is. Carter caught a ball on the sideline one time, and it was just kind of Eckler-like. It's the size and the way I kind of saw him run. It just looked like Eckler for some reason. But the idea of having Eckler and Williams, I think, is just it's pretty. And Staley has referenced so many times, I want to take my offensive players and put them in the best position to succeed. What are they good at? Eckler is really good. You put him in the slot, run a slant. You put him on the outside, run a go, whatever it is. And you have Williams in the backfield to just run that football for you. And Eckler is your fun weapon on the out. Like, screw Joe Reed. Put Austin Eckler outside and do whatever you want with him. Yeah. Holy cow. Like that would be something else. I don't want to say it like I would do it, but man. Kind of would.
Man, it's so tempting, man. And thank you so much for sending this to us. But you know, if you're looking at what like Joe Lombardi has had on the Saints and like what, you know, Shane Day has had on the Niners and obviously what the Packers have done.
Oh yeah.
Like all three of those situations, like they have a strong 1-2 punch. And like, are they really going to look at Joshua Kelly and be like, hey, like this guy is ready to be our like unquestioned, 12, 14 carry a game guy. I don't think that they're going to. And so, we
Yeah.
talked about the pattern of them, meeting with these late round running backs. And to me, that makes more sense because of the needs. But man, you
Sure.
talk about a perfect draft running back to pair with Austin Eckler, and it's Javonte Williams. So the other one that was really interesting to me is Shaun Wade. And I know that Shaun Wade did not have a good 2020 on the outside. It was not pretty, man. But if you're talking about like being proactive as a slot corner, I think that's where Shaun Wade could be best suited. And so if you're taking him to be that, next slot corner after Chris Harris potentially leaves next year in the third round, like as a dart throw, I wouldn't hate it. I'm not going to advocate for it. I certainly understand why someone would take a shot on him in the third round. I think that's probably where he goes. And then you just hope that you're able to coach him back to what he was in 2019.
And I think you can, especially if you have a guy like Harris in front of him and a great secondary around him and a good pass rush around him. Yeah, if they take him, the 2020 season where he looked awful against some good competition. I mean, awful.
Cornell Powell roasted him.
God. Everybody roasted him. There was not a guy. I mean, he's like, I want all the smoke, and it was a complete Australia fire. But
poor guy.
It was bad. Anywho, but if you can get a guy like that and develop him, and you get him in the third round, he was a guy that people had ranked as their number one corner heading into the season because of how good his 2019 season was. Don't quote me on who, I don't remember. But if you can get somewhere, even if you can just kind of bump him to like second round value, or maybe turn him into a starter one day, and you get him in the third round, I think it's a pretty smart move. It is certainly proactive. The Chargers have not been very proactive so far, more reactive. That's why we're going to see a lot of offensive linemen. That's probably why they're taking up offensive tackle at 13. But just being proactive to the future, whoever it is, like I think a corner right in this range would be pretty good. So if that's Shaun Wade, go for it. Tell him Telesco has not shied away from Ohio State players so far.
And it's Tom McShay, so take this with a grain of salt. But back in like September, he had Shaun Wade going as like a top 15 player. And so again, take it with a grain of salt. ESPN is their draft coverage is garbage. But taking a shot on a guy like Shaun Wade in the third round makes a lot of sense. And then Demetric Felton, the receiver / running back from UCLA. You talk about adding a versatile weapon, man. Getting Javonte Williams, Demetric Felton, and Austin Eckler to be your main carriers of the football. Like, I'm not saying Demetric Felton is going to be a running back in the NFL, but he was one in college. And so that potential versatility with Felton and Eckler, ooh, man, that would be mighty tempting.
I like it. If you have a coach as creative as the coach we're supposed to have, then I think this is a wonderful pairing. I watched one game of Demetric Felton. It was like half the game, and he was a running back. I'm like, what? I mean, he's supposed to be a receiver. Like, what am I doing here? I'm watching running back tape. Like, I was gonna skip to the Senior Bowl and see how he did, but otherwise, hey, I'm all for it. And I want to go back to what you mentioned about Williams. You mentioned, all these different places that they've been, the coordinators or the whoever that they have, these certain systems that have the 1-2 punch kind of guys. And yeah, I mean, you're convincing me is what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is you're starting to convince me that this second round pick is kind of a legit discussion to have, because even with Detroit, Lombardi had Amir Abdullah, who they took in the second round, I think so. So that actually kind of lines up. Then they had Bell, I think, more of like a power guy. So I don't know. Like, I could see it. Like, it's gotta make sense. You could legit write an article and make a case for this.
I think we could, honestly. Like, if you really, in the world of like, you sign Alejandro Villanueva, you sign Corey Linsley, you could draft Cosme if you wanted to, you could draft Elijah Vera Tucker, and the offensive line is like that much better. And you're staring at a board without a viable corner or pass rusher or another interior offensive lineman. Like, it could happen. Like Javonte Williams, I think, he's so good, man. And
he is.
I love Zach Moss. Like Zach Moss in terms of like being a bowling ball, running back.
Yeah.
Like Javonte Williams is Zach Moss with a little more juice. Like Javonte Williams is such a good running back. And so it's a very interesting conversation.
One question I want to ask you real fast.
Okay.
Or hopefully it's fast. you like Samuel Cosme a lot, and one of the reasons you like him so much is not just what he does on tape, but you're also, especially after last season where you graded so many players, it's also about the projection of what he's
Yeah.
going to do at the next level, what he can be. What makes you think, why is it that you think he can do that and not as much Darasaw? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Well, that's
I
a
don't know if
good
you understand
question. Yeah.
but like, yeah.
That is a good question. Personally, I think Samuel Cosme has better athletic traits to me. I look
Okay.
at Samuel Cosme and I see the second most athletic offensive lineman behind Penei Sewell, because I think Penei Sewell's athleticism, his balance, his agility,
Sure.
his short area quickness is second to none. But
Yeah.
Samuel Cosme, I think, to me, has the second best traits. And there are definitely some things that he has to clean up. And really, my biggest issue is that you watch him against Oklahoma and he's great. You watch him against TCU and he's very good. You watch him against West Virginia and he's not very good. There's a little bit of like playing down to competition there that I'm not in love with and I'm not crazy about. And he does have this tendency to like backpedal into his pass set instead of like really exploding out of his stance, which that's something that definitely can be cleaned up. And I think that's something that a lot of scouts have looked at and it's not really like their favorite. And I get that. But to me, it's just projecting the athleticism, projecting the mobility, projecting the violent hands, and the ability to be a urgent blocker. And so, I did just do my scouting profile on Christian Darasaw. He is mobile and he can definitely be a high level tackle. It's just the lack of like urgency with me. Like, I don't want to say it's lackadaisical. I don't want to say it's lazy because it's consistent. Like, he plays at his own pace, and that is a good thing. Like, he does play under control. But if I'm taking an offensive tackle at 13, I want to be able to see that urgency as a pass blocker, as a run blocker. And even though he's a little more inconsistent, Samuel Cosme does display it more often than Christian Darasaw does.
Gotcha. Thank you. I always wondered that because I know you felt differently about both players, but you could even argue that Cosme had more bad games, but you have him held to a certain way. So I was always just very curious about how you view those two. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's definitely a traits versus like, actual tape, because Christian Darasaw's tape is better. I just think Samuel Cosme's traits, there's a higher ceiling there in my opinion, but obviously that comes with more risk as well.
Sure.
So the next one I want to get to is Felix. This is an interesting idea as well. So he has Kwity Paye at 13, James Hudson, my guy from Cincinnati, at 47, Josh Myers at 77, Keith Taylor, who we mentioned earlier, the corner, Ben Cleveland, again, another one who we mentioned earlier, and then Ellerson Smith at 160. So he took 2 edge rushers and he took 3 offensive linemen and 1 cornerback. So this definitely is a draft of need. But what's interesting to me is doubling down on the edge rusher position. You get Kwity Paye and Ellerson Smith, who I know not a lot of people have watched because there isn't much because his 2020 season was canceled. But he's got some really intriguing upside and traits as an edge rusher, and getting Kwity Paye as well there is pretty interesting to me.
I think it's a good call. I mean, there was a point in the season where you're watching Emeka Egbule and Joe Gaziano and Isaac Rochelle all rush the passer.
Oh, man.
It's a slightly different system, but like you can't, I mean, it almost worked is the crazy thing, but you can't do that. That is not sustainable. And so, I mean, yeah, Kwity Paye just only fills one spot. He's only gonna be one guy at one position. So, looking ahead to the future, whether there be injuries, because Bosa isn't really all that healthy, or the fact that Nwosu is going to be gone. I haven't watched Ellerson Smith, so I couldn't tell you where he plays or what he does other than edge. But just looking ahead to these guys, because you're going to lose some guys. These guys are going to be injured. I think it's really smart to double down. And I always, if the production's there, like someone like slightly different, but Cortez Broughton, was he really going to start over Jerry Tillery? No. Was he going to start over whoever they had, Justin Jones at the time? No. But for him to have that high production, that high kind of upside, I think this is where he was 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 5th round he took Smith.
5th round, yeah.
Yeah, so I think around there, at this point it's dart throw. So if the production's there, find another guy who can maybe develop along the way. So I'm all for it. I think Kwity Paye at 13 is not as unrealistic as we already talked about it the last time we spoke.
Yeah,
I think edge at 13 is a legit possibility, especially because they don't have the answer there yet. They don't have the answers there, and I'd love to let Nwosu do it, but you can't trust him. I'd love to let Adderley be the starting free safety, but you can't really trust him. I'd love to, so why wonder? Take your
Yeah.
guy. At worst, you have Pay, who turns out really good, and Mosu, who turns out really well. Like that's great. Like it's a great problem to have, is multiple pass rushers. The Chargers were getting to the quarterback, getting to Mahomes, in week 2 because they had so many pass rushers. They had such a great rotation. And so, if that's Pay and Mosu and Bosa instead of, Ingram and Mosu and Bosa, great. Like go for it. I'm all for it. I think it's a really good decision. I couldn't tell you if Smith is good or not, but I think it's that train of thinking is really good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the first 2 games for the Chargers defense, like their pressure rate was
Holy
absurd, man. They had like 54 pressures in the first 2 games.
Yeah.
And so, being able to have that kind of flexibility, Uchenna Nwosu, you're our starting outside linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Quiddy Pay, we're going to bring you in as a situational pass rusher. We'll let you just get after the quarterback and play loose and play free.
Yeah.
That's a very proactive and smart move, because
that too.
Nwosu is a free agent after next season. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Getting that kind of player at 13, I mentioned this the other day. I think to me, there are 3 pass rushers who have like true star potential, and that's Pay, Rousseau, who I don't have a high grade on, but like potentially, like you can see it, like
potential, sure. Mm-hmm.
And then Azeez Ojulari is the other one. And so if one of those 3 is the pick at 13, I'm cool with it, because if there's one thing that really makes everything else on defense easier, it's having legitimate pass rushers that can take pressure off of linebackers and can take pressure off of cornerbacks, because they're getting after the other quarterbacks at such a high rate, which is what we saw in the first 2 weeks. James Hudson in the second round, I'm all for this. I love James Hudson. I think he's got some serious potential there. I would just say in this kind of scenario, this is where signing Alejandro Villanueva or somebody else at left tackle would make sense, because, I don't know if James Hudson is a start from day one kind of tackle. I think he has the potential to get there. But in this scenario, I think, you sign Villanueva, and then James Hudson would take over at right tackle for Brian Bulaga after next season. But definitely love the pick again. Being proactive, which has become the theme of the day. It makes a lot of sense there.
No, it makes perfect sense. I think we've always kind of projected him as that future right tackle. Is it rich to take a guy who's not really maybe going to start the entire season? Maybe, but be proactive. And I get that there's concern. He's very raw. He's only played less than 400 snaps in all of his 3 years. And certainly the level of competition is an issue, but he looked so damn good at the Senior Bowl. Do you want a more day one impact guy? Sure. But just when you're under the belt and build him as your future right tackle, I'm all for it. Same like Pay, kind of like Taylor, probably like Myers or Ben Cleveland or like Ellerson Smith. These are all guys that, yes, they will contribute probably in 2021, but like you can also carry them into the next season as well, which the Chargers have not done at all this past season.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is definitely a very proactive draft in general, which I really like. And I think this is just a really smart way to build a team.
Yep.
So we'll get to the next one here from Thomas SoCal Fan 59. This is a really interesting one as well, because he took Caleb Farley at 13. This is a Pro Football Network mock draft, so a little bit different there. Caleb Farley is almost never on the board at the Draft Network, but at Pro Football Network he is. I think they have JC Horn higher. I think that's why. And then he has Lander Dickerson, Walker Little at 77, Hamilcar Rashed Jr., the edge rusher at 97, Aaron Banks, the offensive lineman from Notre Dame, and then Sage Surratt, the wide receiver from Wake Forest. So to me, you look at this draft, you get Landon Dickerson, Walker Little, and Aaron Banks. Like, sign me up. Like, where do I sign immediately? Because I love that draft.
Yeah, it's a good set. I mean, Dickerson, obviously, Walker Little. It's almost like you have to really project with Walker Little.
Yes.
I think this is a move the Chargers could make. The guy who's considered at some point who's going to be a future, OT1 in some draft, to get him in the 3rd round is pretty good. The only issue I have with this draft overall, and it's not really an issue, it's just that there's a lot of question marks. Caleb Farley, what has he done since? Leonard Dickerson and his injury. Walker Little, huge question mark. Look at Hamilcar Rashed. The debate will come down to, is he 2019 we had 15 sacks, or the guy who had 0 in 2020 on half as many rushes, sure. But, I think there's just a lot of question marks through this and a lot of projection, but that's the nature of the year we're going to have. And that's the nature of this upcoming draft. So based on what they've done on tape, I love Farley. I love Dickerson. I really like Little. I don't love him. That's why he's in the 3rd round. Rashid, I'm a little bit lower on. I'm not a huge fan, but if you can get that potential and you're getting with your 4th pick, like that's pretty solid. I have not watched Banks or Surratt, so I'll take your word for whatever they are.
Surratt is not my favorite receiver, and I understand, in the 5th round, like, to me, he's just doesn't really have anything like special. Like, he's not a yards after catch guy. He's not a crazy jump ball guy. He's not a route runner. He does everything decently. Like, he's that master of none kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But in terms of like these first 5 picks, really, Caleb Farley at 13, I would totally get behind it. Again, I would prefer an edge rusher instead of the corner, but I'm not going to say no to Caleb Farley. I think Caleb Farley is a fantastic prospect. The really interesting one is Walker Little, because like you said, he played 1 game in 2019. He opted out of this season when the Pac-12 season went to shit. And totally understand. It sucks that we didn't get to see him play any games really in the last 2 years. But I mean, he was a huge recruit. He was, I want to say, 2nd team all conference as a freshman. And he was like the conference's freshman of the year as a left tackle.
Wow.
And his 2nd season was just as good. So like, there's legitimate potential there. It's just like you said, we haven't seen him play in 2 years. Like, did that injury hinder him at all? We don't really know. How serious was the injury? Again, we don't know. Did he develop? Did he get stronger? We don't know. And so the potential is there, but if there's anybody that has more question marks in the draft, I can't think of one. Like, Walker Little is the toughest evaluation because you have to go back and watch tape from 2 years ago. Like, Caleb Farley, he didn't play this year, but he played in 2019. Walker Little essentially has not played football in 2 years. And so if you take him in the 2nd round, I think that's probably a little rich. I would understand it, again, if you're signing like Alejandro Villanueva to be able to have Little as like a developmental tackle for a year. I would understand that move, similar to James Hudson. But I think in the 3rd round is absolutely worth a shot because, again, it's a dart throw. And I don't know of many other dart throws in the 3rd round that have a higher ceiling than Walker Little.
And by golly, if you're going to make a freaking 3rd round pick again, like, it's all dart throws, man. It's a dart throw, blindfolded and spinning. So
it really is.
Whatever happens in the 3rd round, like, go for it. If they get him in the 3rd, it almost seems like he's a guaranteed bust at this point. But I hope he does well. And I go for it. Why not? You took Craig Mager. You took Chris Watt. Like, you could do a lot worse than the guy who was projected to be an offensive tackle 1 at some point.
Oh man, eventually Tom Telesco has to hit a 3rd round pick, man. Like, this just cannot continue. If he trades it up again,
I think he sold his 3rd round soul for a Keenan Allen. Like, that was it. Like, you can have Keenan Allen, but shit for the rest of your life. Like, it's always going to be bad. I don't know who they picked in the 3rd round last year. Oh, nobody.
They traded it for Kenneth Murray.
That was their best pick.
It was. Eventually he's got 2 this year, so he's got to hit on at least one of them, man. Like, come on, Telesco, you got to figure it out. All right, so the last one that I want to Sioux Falls, just so weird, man. Like, he was gonna be there in the 5th round. Like, what was that? Anyways, so the last one I want to talk about here is from Ash Till, who is another podcast host. He does the podcast with Lee Wakefield. I'm sorry, the name is escaping me. It's a college football podcast. Sorry, guys. That's kind of embarrassing, but anyway, so his draft, he had Christian Darrisaw at 13, Ronnie Perkins, the edge rusher from Oklahoma, at 47, Quinn Miners, the interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin Whitewater, who stole the show at the Senior Bowl, and then Elijah Moore, the receiver from Mississippi, Trill Williams, the cornerback from Syracuse, and then Robert Hainsey, the interior offensive lineman from Notre Dame. We got another Irishman. I think we had one in every single draft.
To throw it in there.
I did not plan that one. I'm sorry. But Darrisaw, Perkins, Miners, Moore, Williams, Hainsey. What stands out to you about this one?
Elijah Moore, please give me in the 4th. If he's
that'd be so good.
Draft, okay. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Elijah Moore is perfect. He is the perfect.
So
Like Tommy Trumbull in the fourth makes a ton of sense for what the team needs, but like this fit with Moore there is so good. Let's just take Williams in the second and then Moore in the third round. By the way, if Moore and Miners are there in the third round, I am taking Moore over Miners
100%.
every day. Like if I
100%.
can get Miners later or I miss him, fine. If Moore is on the board in the third round, I am taking him. I don't know why he's always so late in these drafts. Like it's like the 70 or 80th guy on their board. Like I just don't buy that at all. Fantastic hands, fantastic route runner, incredible after contact. If he were taller, he would be like first round, no problem, but he's not. And so I still don't know why he's dropping this far, but he is the guy that absolutely stands out for me.
Yeah, to me, if you're talking about like third round picks, if a Tutu Atwell is there or a Elijah Moore in this case, or a Demetric Felton, or like I don't think Rondale Moore would be there, or a Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan. Like I'm taking those guys. Like, I think in this draft, the third round is the best spot to take a receiver. Deontay Brown is another one who's been there in the third round. That's a no-brainer to me. But Elijah Moore is my wide receiver 3. Like I love Elijah Moore, man. And you talk about being a perfect fit, like you said, he's a great route runner. He's great after the catch. He can do so many different things. And I think that's what the Chargers need. Like, could they add a Rondale Moore, a Tutu Atwell, who more of like gadget guys, downfield guys? Sure, like that would make a lot of sense. But Elijah Moore, like you talk about a true wide receiver 3 on the team and future wide receiver 2. It doesn't get much better than Elijah Moore, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly a different kind of wide receiver to 3 than a Guyton or a Williams, but it almost seems like he's like anti-bust potential with the way that his hands are so good.
So
the
way
he can create after contact. Like those two things, having great hands, and he already runs routes very, very well, and just be able to make, plays for yourself. I think it just seems so anti-bust. If he's there, I would take Moore in the second. Like I'll be honest right here. I don't know who Ronnie Perkins is. I have not watched him. If Moore is there in the second, I would honestly consider it because I think he's that good. You have a first on him. He's your wide receiver 3. I have a first on him. I think he's somewhere in the top 5, top 6 at least. I really, really like this guy. So this is a great, great selection. Ash, you caught the best receiver. That was a really bad Pokemon joke. Move on.
Nice one. So Ronnie Perkins is interesting. Like he was suspended to start this season, which
great.
I think it might be an academic thing. I don't really know enough about that situation. But Daniel Jeremiah has him as a top 40 player. I think he is. So Daniel Jeremiah really likes him. He's really the only one that's kind of pounding the table for him. I was watching him play against Oklahoma State yesterday. And Tevin Jenkins is a fantastic offensive tackle. I think he's one of the best in the class. Yeah. And, he gave Joseph Osai a ton of problems. And I love Joseph Osai. The one edge rusher that gave Tevin Jenkins problems was Ronnie Perkins. Like his athletic tools, his length, and the athletic upside there, it's very tantalizing. Like it's very intriguing. But again, he was suspended. He didn't really play a whole lot last year. So it's a little bit more of an unsure thing. Again, that's really what the edge rusher class is like after the big 3 that I mentioned, because Joe Tryon didn't play last year. He was an opt-out. Quincy Roche, really how good is he? So if you're going to take a gamble on an athletic edge rusher, I think Ronnie Perkins is probably the one.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah, at some point you're trying to find some sort of upside with these guys.
Yeah.
Is the guy that's suspended ever been drafted by the Chargers? I know they've kept some PED suspension guys, but I don't know if coming out of college you being suspended. Like the closest thing they got to any kind of character issues was Jerry Tiller stepping on a USC player once, and that was like it. So, a great academic. Like I don't know if academic is the same thing as like character issues, but I just don't think Telesco's gonna go for that. So, if they take him, I'd be surprised. I haven't watched any of him, but if he has that upside, yeah, you take your shot.
Yeah. So before I forget, Lee Wakefield and Ash, they are the hosts of the Full 10 Yards College podcast. I'm sorry I didn't remember that earlier. I had to go look it up. Had a little brain fart there. So Chargers fans, please go check them out. Tyler, any other thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
This was a lot better than what we did last year. We just go through 37 of them and watch, Tua or Herbert be picked at 6, and then they trade back in for Austin Jackson. And like, this is a lot better than doing, 4.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even get to do it. I just sat there and listened to you guys for 2 hours talking about these guys. Like, oh, come on. So anyway,
it was a lot more
much
fun.
Better.
I had to make the qualifier no trades, because last year I remember there was somebody that sent us one on Pro Football Network where the Chargers had 3 first-round picks, and the guy like did not send any kind of description about what the trades were, what happened. It was just like, here's my 3 trades into the first round, which they ended up getting too. But it was like, I was just like so confused because it was like 6, 12, and then like 31. Geez. And I was like, okay, what's the plan here? But this was a lot of fun, man. I think that we covered a lot of different ideas. I cannot get Javonte Williams out of my head right now.
There you go.
I don't know, man. Like, it's just super interesting. And so thank you so much for sending us that one. And thanks to everybody else who sent us other mock drafts. I think there were a lot of interesting ideas. It was just a lot of fun to talk about this episode. I think this was a good time to talk about this, because we're in that kind of lull where we're waiting for free agency to start. As of recording this, we're 60 days away from the draft, and I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, me too. 60 days. God, we were just talking about this. It was like 80. So it's getting there. At least we'll have free agency soon. But yeah, everyone, thank you very much for sending those in. I think my main theme of this offseason, or looking at these players, is I'm not just going to rule someone out because it just doesn't quite make sense, and I'm just going to throw them out. Like, I have Rousseau way down on my board of edge rushers, but you know what? I can see why they would take them at 13.
Yeah.
Should they take a running back in the second round? No. But after talking about it with you and considering their offensive staff, what they need, the value of the player, and how good he is, like, that makes sense to me too. So I really think it's cool to look at these different drafts, and even if you don't agree with it, at least consider these points that people are bringing up, because, without saying it, I see what they're doing, whether it's being proactive or, trying to fit some certain guy for the certain position or whatever it is. Like, I see what you guys are doing, and it's really cool. So I really appreciate all your stuff. I can't wait for you all to be wrong, just like every other mock draft.
It's totally fun to talk about different ideas, because as much as we all think that the Chargers should take an offensive lineman, like in the first 2 rounds, it gets a little boring. And talking about Javonte Williams in the second round, like, it's just a way more fun conversation than Landon Dickerson for the 37th time in a row, like, or Dylan Radunes. And like, obviously I would love those picks, but definitely some fun conversations today. So thank you guys so much for sending us those mock drafts. Thanks for tuning in, and that'll do it for us, and we'll see you next time.